So when
Are we starting?
are we going? Can you speak to the genesis and mandate of Canadian Society for Iranian and Persian Studies, as well as to the need for such a society?
The idea of establishing a Canadian Society for Iranian Studies, really I began to think about it after the International Society for Iranian Studies decided to change its name to Association for Iranian Studies. And I saw since it's moving in that direction, that is dropping international, that could be an umbrella for including everyone. And since we have had British Iranian Studies, European Iranian Studies, and a number of other national formations like that, I thought it would be really timely to do the Canadian Studies for Iranians, Canadian Society for Iranian Studies, and later on decided to make it Canadian Society for Iranian and Persian Studies. And the way and with the establishment of the Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto, that provided the perfect opportunity, and the original directory that we compiled for the institute beyond the faculty at the University of Toronto. It was a directory of Iranian Studies scholars, and again, the idea was this will become part of the Canadian Society for Iranian Studies. So it was during that period, and I think during this particular period that we are, historical period, the age of Trump, so to speak, I think Canadian Society for Iranian Studies can play a vital role in steering Iranian studies at a time that there will be a lot of hostility to Iranian studies, Persian studies in the United States. So we are a safe place for the study of Iran. And since we are multi-confessional, multilingual, and try to be inclusive of both ancient, medieval, and modern period and different other fields, I think we serve as an exemplar that and the Institute's mandate and that of the Canadian Society for Iranian Studies for preservation and enhancement of Iranian studies works together really well.
There's also the point that there are a lot of scholars throughout Canada who work on Iran and could really use an organization to connect to. So it's a way of drawing together faculty working in Iranian and Persian studies at Regina, in Edmonton, in Alberta, in BC, and connecting them to what we do here in Toronto. It's you need a kind of organization that can reach out and that people can connect to and draw together these discussions, draw scholars together. Scholarship can be kind of a lonely endeavor, especially if you're in a smaller place, and so it's important to have a larger community to connect to. And the Iranian diaspora in Canada is really remarkable in terms of how diverse it is and its creativity and just the energy that people have. And there's a way in which Iranian studies in Canada can be something quite special. So this organization and the Omidyar Center at the University of Toronto has a very special mandate in that way.
And just one additional point, and Iran Namak, this is the quarterly journal of Iranian Studies that was an independent journal, now has become the Journal of the Canadian Society for Iranian Studies and the Institute of Iranian Studies. Again, that can play a very important role in networking, but also professionalization, provide a place for students and scholars of Iranian studies in Canada and beyond to publish in bilingual journal, and those are important. And also our conferences, our seminars can be also a place for professionalization of our students to develop their CVs, to present their scholarship, get feedback from academics.
Well, along those lines, sometimes the most creative things happening in a field are from the youngest members. They're from the students finishing dissertations who are really pushing at the edges of scholarship and expanding what we know and posing new questions. And it can often be very difficult for students finishing dissertations and entering the field to find a place to publish. And so having the journal dedicated to Iranian studies in that way, it's a wonderful way to enable their scholarship to reach a wider audience and to help them in creating a publishing record and moving into academic work if that's what they wish to do.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I think you answered two of the questions of your answers. Please tell us about some of the dynamics of the Canadian Society for Iranian and Persian Studies, the board of directors, some of the names, and institutions that the society gonna work with and gonna cooperate with.
The board includes some of the faculty at the University of Toronto, at York University, and UBC. And we are hoping with this inaugural meeting expand the members of the board. The board currently doesn't include student members, and we will be also include the student members in the board, the executive board, and to make it a fully fledged, fully developed kind of Institute of Iranian Studies, and organize our annual conferences in conjunction with the Institute of Iranian Studies, and also seek the support and the sponsorship of other Iranian Studies program all over Canada. So these are the directions that we are hoping to move.
The board is also, in terms of the faculty on it from the University of Toronto, of which I'm one member, I'm a historian, and I do international and global history and work on Germany and Iran. So I think that I'm there to also, it's one of the ways that we're trying to signal kind of opening up the ways in which we hope to open up the field more generally.
So the field is not a silo, but it is an open field of connecting scholarships worldwide.
Wonderful. That brings me to my third question. You are both historians. I wanted to know, what is the significance of Iranian studies in its Canadian context within the global context of history and historiography?
In the Canadian context, that has a slightly different answer.
I would see it as global, but more as a global context. Canadian is part of the globality of it. And the Iranian diaspora community in Canada, while distinctive, is representative of global Iranian diaspora studies.
Definitely.
The Iranian studies, the scholars here partly were trained like myself in North America, but others have been trained in Iran as part of this political turmoils that also have important global dimensions and have come here. So you have a percolating of waves that are global in content. What was the second part of the?
As historians.
As historians, having worked on the wide scope of Iranian studies, I think by placing Iran in a dialogue, in dialogue with global development, rather than an enclosed nationalist Iranian historiography, have an Iranian historiography, historical accounting that is linked globally, will make Iranian studies the site for theorization, historiographical development, and a lot of things that one may not be able to articulate from a Eurocentric perspective. So my hope is that Iranian studies opening up and looking at the global connections and various trends that are developing could enhance modern historiography and theorization in humanities and social sciences in a way that it would not have been possible within the national East-West, Orient-Occident, national borders and territories in this global. And what Professor Jenkins is doing is really laying the ground for this new direction in Iranian studies that is in intimate dialogue and contact with global development. And the implication of Professor Jenkins' forthcoming book is that most European historians have got the narrative of World War I wrong.
Yeah.
It wasn't Europe. It
No,
wasn't
easy.
just European. No. So that changes the account, you know.
Or thank you for your kind words. I would give a couple of different answers to that very interesting question. Canadian diversity, and kind of the support for diversity in Canada, can and the diversity, the faculty in Iranian studies, the students in the courses, the students from Iran, the Canadian Iranian students, there's tremendous diversity up here, and people have connections, kind of connecting them to things all over the world. So there's a way in which it can be a very creative mix of things, and I think there's ways in which that diversity it enhances creativity and intellectual engagement and intensity here in the Omidyar Institute. But we're living in a time when connections are being broken, when sort of national borders are being reified, and I think here in Canada we have the opportunity. We're very lucky to have the opportunity to keep building on the connections, to keep building on the diversity and the creativity. So there's, in terms of thinking about the Canadian part, with thinking about Iran in world history, I mean, Iran has been a connector between East and West for a very long time. And I go back to one of the people I cite in my book. I don't like this person, but he, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Of course.
This was the U.S. State Department official Arthur Millspaugh. And he wrote in 1946 that Iran, he says, because of where it is, what it is, and what people want from it, it has been kind of the site of tension, of international tension, and kind of a crossroads of global developments for a long time. That it is this very important place, this connecting place. And I think that's really true, especially if you look at the history of the 20th century, that Iran plays an incredibly important connecting place. If you look at Iran, or if you look at the Second World War, for example, in terms of global histories of the Second World War, if you look at the Second World War from the perspective of Tehran, thinking about the Tehran Conference of 1943, one of the big diplomatic conferences, the history of Lend-Lease and the U.S. occupation in Iran, the fund, the working of the alliance, the funding of the Soviet armies, Iran becomes this. It's argued that it is the most important non-combatant zone in the entire war, and and it's very particular and very important, the kinds of things that happen there, and that Iran then likewise is one of the seedbeds for the emerging global order in 1945. And these are things that we need. This global order is being dismantled now by the United States.
But it was built in Iran originally.
By the United States. Franklin Roosevelt had very interesting ideas about Iran as a test case for the United Nations, the way he was thinking of it. So, at this moment where the global order is being dismantled, it's kind of all the more important to learn in a very kind of international and transnational and global way what it was. And Iran has a big part of that, is a big part of that history.
Last question. Today we had an inaugural successful Congress, and apart from the Congress in 2026, what are events or activities are being planned for the future, and what are publications or other activities would be part of that plan?
Lots of plans, lots of things.
Yeah.
That's a project.
We had a really intense discussion during the last session on the future of Iranian studies, and having seminar series that is sponsored by the Canadian Society for Iranian Studies. During the years, Association for Iranian Studies has its biannual conference every 2 years. And the year that they don't have the conference, we are planning to have our conferences. and it will create also an opportunity for a lot of people who cannot travel to the United States for Iranian Studies conferences, come to Canada and enjoy the Canadian hospitality. And also enjoy Toronto and other places. And then also a number of special issues on, for example, institutionalizing Iranian studies, part of this new a conference that we are doing in September, and it will be a special issue of the journal that will be published. So there are a lot of ideas that are percolating, and
well, there's a big conference on the global Iranian diaspora.
Yeah, global Iranian diaspora for
that's very exciting.
May 2026. So that is really important. And these are the kind of things that both the Institute and Canadian Society for Iranian and Persian Studies would do.